You guys hear me okay? It's good? All right. So how's everyone doing today? Good? Excellent, excellent. All right, so I always like to start off my presentations with a horrible vegan joke. So who here knows why the tofu crossed the road? To prove it wasn't chicken. Thank you. So that's the only lame joke I'll tell today. Thank you. And actually that's a lie. There's another one later on in my presentation, but we'll get to that in a second. So again, my name is Mikael Nielsen. I am the National Volunteer Coordinator with Mercy for Animals. And today I'm going to be talking about inspiring compassion and putting our ethics on the table. If you're not familiar with Mercy for Animals, we are a national nonprofit animal protection organization dedicated to preventing cruelty to farmed animals and promoting compassionate food choices and policies. So we do that in a number of ways, including undercover investigations into factory farms and slaughterhouses. We do advertising campaigns. We work with lawmakers and corporations to enact more animal-friendly laws and policies. And we do a ton of grassroots outreach all over the United States. So before we get going, let me just tell you a little bit about how Mercy for Animals was founded. We were founded in 1999 by this guy here, Nathan Runkle. He wasn't quite this young when he founded Mercy for Animals, but not too far off. He was only 15 at the time. So yeah, pretty amazing. And how Mercy for Animals got started was because of a cruelty case in rural Ohio, which is where Nathan grew up. There was a biology teacher there who also happened to own a hog farm. And a couple times a year, this biology teacher would bring in baby piglets from his hog farm to be dissected for his biology class. On one particular day, the baby piglets that he brought in, it turned out one of them was still alive. So one of the students, who also happened to work part-time on this teacher's hog farm, grabbed her by the hind legs and slammed her head first into the ground, trying to kill her. He did not succeed. She had a skull fracture. It was in horrible stress, just bleeding from the mouth. So some of the other students went and got another teacher that was known to be more sympathetic to farmed animals, and they had her brought to the vet and euthanized. So what they discovered when they tried to get the student in trouble for what seemed like blatant animal abuse is that blunt force trauma, right there, blunt force trauma to a baby piglet is an absolutely legal way to kill a baby piglet. So this made Nathan realize that there was a real need for farmed animal protection in this country, and as a result, he founded Mercy for Animals. So this is what Mercy for Animals looks like today as far as outreach goes. Investigations, education, which I'm a part of, our legal advocacy department, and then corporate outreach. And as you can see, we all kind of work together to reduce the suffering of farmed animals. Okay, so who here has ever heard of Dr. Jane Goodall? All right, most of you guys did. So she once famously said, "We have to understand we are not the only beings on this planet with personalities and minds." So Dr. Goodall was one of the first people to study the minds of animals, and one of the ways that she did this was by going out and living with chimpanzees in the wild. In doing so, she realized that many of the characteristics that we thought were unique to people were in fact not so unique. Things like language, culture, showing empathy, and the use of tools. Also, the touch of cold metal on skin. So like Dr. Goodall, other animal behaviorists started studying the minds of dogs, cats, and most recently, farmed animals: cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, and fish. And the more we learn about these animals, the more we see that they are unique individuals with their own personalities and minds, just like chimpanzees, dogs, and cats. So this is my guy Oliver here. He was rescued from a shelter in Indiana about 7 years ago. How many of you guys here grew up around dogs and cats? All right, most of you guys did. So I think, it's living with these animals that's helped show many of us, they have needs, likes, dislikes, and emotions. We can kind of tell when they're happy or sad, when they're feeling real playful, or just in the mood to sleep all day. And I think most of us have also learned that they are all different from one another. Would you guys agree with that? Again, that's exactly how farmed animals are. Unique individuals with their own personalities and minds. So again, I think anyone that's spent a significant amount of time with an animal knows that, like us, they have emotional and social lives and a zest for living. Like us, they have unique personalities and are capable of experiencing joy and suffering as well as pleasure and pain. They are mothers and fathers, and they have friends and family whom they care about. And their lives do matter to them. So this is an image of a dog used in a dog fighting ring. You can see how messed up his face is. His one eye swollen shut, scabs and scrapes all over his face. His one leg's broken. And this is generally the type of image that people think about in this country when we start talking animal cruelty. A high-profile case of an individual acting maliciously or sadistically towards a dog or a cat. The Michael Vick case from a few years back comes to mind. And there's no doubt that this type of cruelty is important to prevent. But the vast majority of animals that are abused and exploited in this country are not dogs and cats. They are farmed animals. So normally I ask this question, but we have a pretty smart crowd here today, so I won't even bother. The answer is 9 billion. And of course the question is, how many land animals do we kill in this country every year? 9 billion, again, billion with a B. That breaks down to be about 8.5 billion chickens, around 244 million turkeys, roughly 120 million pigs, and around 34 million cows. This here is a visual slaughterhouse line that kind of breaks down some of those numbers a little bit more. So you can see about 287 chickens are killed per second in this country, almost 4 pigs are killed per second, and a little over 1 cow is killed per second in this country for food. So in the short amount of time that we've had this slide up, over 6,000 animals have been killed for food. So, if you're like me, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around something like this. I think, these numbers are pretty mind-boggling. I think a lot of us could sit here and watch this go by all day and not fully grasp the impact of what these numbers mean. There's a saying that goes, 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million deaths, or in this case, 9 billion, is just a statistic. But what we have to remember is that every single one of these animals is a unique individual with their own needs, likes, dislikes, and emotions. And the story of their suffering is unique to them. So hopefully as we go through today's presentation, we'll see that a little bit more as we learn about what their lives and deaths are like. So, who are farmed animals? In this country, we actually speak in quite derogatory ways when referring to farmed animals. If you call somebody a chicken, you're probably implying that they are fearful. Or if you call somebody a pig, you're probably implying that they overindulge. But these terms rarely relate the truth about who these animals really are. Take chickens, for example. Researchers have found that chickens have over 30 unique calls or words that they use to communicate amongst each other. So they have calls for aerial predators and different calls for land predators. And they have a variety of different calls depending on what kind of food they find. It's also been shown that chickens can understand cause and effect behavior and then pass that information down from generation to generation. Chickens can also recognize the faces of up to 100 other chickens. So if you or I were to look at 100 chickens in a room, I'm sure their faces would look pretty much the same. But to chickens, their faces look as unique as each and every one of ours does to each other. Dr. Bernard Rollin from the University of Colorado said, "Contrary to what one may hear from the industry, chickens are complex behaviorally, do quite well in learning, show a rich social organization, and have a diverse repertoire of calls. Anyone who has kept barnyard chickens recognizes their significant differences in personality." Now, I volunteered at farm sanctuaries where they've had chickens, and I can absolutely say that this holds true. Some chickens are very social. They'll follow you around all day long, pecking at your feet, demanding that you keep feeding them grapes. And then other chickens are not very social at all, preferring to kind of keep to themselves and not really interact with anybody. So in this way, the personality differences of chickens are very much like that of dogs and cats, or you and I. Pigs have over 20 unique grunts and snorts that they use to communicate amongst each other. And they are actually considered some of the smartest beings on the earth. In fact, they are ranked 6th smartest animal, which puts them right up there with chimpanzees, dolphins, orangutans, and elephants. The researcher Dr. Donald Broom said, pigs have the cognitive ability to be sophisticated, even more so than dogs, and certainly 3-year-olds. So when he says 3-year-olds, of course he's talking about 3-year-old children. Now, I have a 3-year-old niece right now, and you probably know somebody about that same age as well. And to me, it's very interesting to think about, all the things that's going on in my niece's mind, her developing sense of humor, her intelligence, her curiosity. These are all similar things that are going on in the mind of a pig. Researchers have also shown that pigs can learn how to play video games, like this pig here, using a special joystick to play the old Atari game, Pong. So again, I don't know about your dogs, but my guy Oliver would definitely not be able to learn how to play a video game. So we know that, that pigs are pretty darn smart. I have heard that some researchers are working on teaching them how to play the game Dance Dance Revolution, but I'm not quite sure how that one's going. So that was my second lame joke, by the way. So cows are considered some of the most peaceful and angelic creatures on the earth. We can kind of think of them as like elephants in that they travel in large herds and develop these incredibly tight family bonds. It's also been shown that cows have really intense emotions and can even hold a grudge towards another cow that might have wronged them sometime in the past. For a long time, animal behaviorists didn't know much about fish, but today we know that they experience pain in very much the same way that mammals do. It's also been shown that fish can experience pleasure, know how to use tools, and have a memory span of at least 5 months. So I share this information about the intelligence of farmed animals because I think if people knew, they would treat them differently. But at the end of the day, it really does not matter if pigs can learn how to play video games or if chickens can pass down information from generation to generation. What is important is, can they feel pain? Can they suffer? You guys might have seen this quote from the philosopher Jeremy Bentham somewhere along the way. He wrote, "The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer?" And today, we know for a fact that farmed animals experience pain in very much the same way that you and I do. They have a brain, they have a central nervous system, and they have nerve endings. So the real question that we have to ask ourselves as a civilized society is, can we justify the unnecessary suffering that these animals have to endure? This is a picture of a farm taken circa 1930, and this is what most farms looked like back in those days. You got the traditional barn, you got the animals fenced in the grassy area, kind of running around outside. And it is no accident that this is usually the same type of image that our minds conjure up today if we're asked to think about what a farm looks like. Go to any grocery store like Jewel or Dominic's, pick up an egg carton or a milk carton, and you will no doubt see the red barn, the green grass, and the animals frolicking around outside very happily. A lot of children's books are about farms as well. I'm sure you guys remember the song and book Old MacDonald Had a Farm. At a very young age, we are conditioned to believe that this is what a farm still looks like today and how it operates. And again, 60 or 70 years ago, this image certainly would hold true. But since that time, there has been an incredibly large shift away from these small family farms over to the huge corporate factory farms. Factory farms like this one here. So this is an egg-laying operation. You can't see them all, but there is about 11 or about 10 sheds there total. Each shed will house around 100,000 chickens. So that means on this factory farm alone, there's over 1 million egg-laying hens. So again, you might ask yourself, how did we get to this point? How did we get from the small family farms to this? And it started back around the 1940s when farmers started applying factory methods to the farms they worked on and to the living, breathing, thinking animals that they raised on those farms. So over time, cages became smaller and operations became more mechanized, up until today when these animals are nothing more than meat, milk, and egg-producing machinery. To illustrate that a little bit more, here's a quote from Hog Farm Management magazine, which is an industry magazine. So they write, "Forget the pig as an animal. Treat him just like a machine in a factory. Schedule treatments like you would lubrication, breeding season like the first step in an assembly line, and marketing like the delivery of finished goods." So this image here and this one here are pictures of a mother sow in a 2-foot wide gestation crate. This is a crate about the size of that table there. She will spend about 4 months straight in this crate, only being let out once to give birth, after which she will get put into a very similar crate. So this means she can't turn around and she can't lie down comfortably for nearly her entire life. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out that these highly intelligent animals, which are smarter than dogs, go absolutely insane with nothing to do all day but stand on this metal crate. They end up standing in their own waste with no physical or mental stimulation for months on end. A lot of them resort to repetitive bar biting like this one here, or just slamming their heads up against the sides of their cages. These are the same signs of mental collapse that we'll see in humans who are in mental health institutions. Today, the chicken industry has become so specialized that there's basically only 2 types of birds bred. The chicken here on the on the left, is one raised for eggs. She is bred to be incredibly small, so this way that many more of them can be crammed into a single cage. The chicken here on the right is one bred for meat, and she is fed growth hormones and steroids in order to be to grow at an incredibly fast pace, and is sent to slaughter at around 47 days old. So let me get back to the chickens raised for meat here with a little chart from my buddy Harish at countinganimals.com. So on the horizontal, we have the average age of a chicken in days. On the vertical, the average live weight in pounds. So back in 1925, chickens were sent to slaughter at around 112 days, weighing a little over 2 pounds. Fast forward to the 1950s, and they were sent to slaughter at about 72, 78 days and weighed around 3 pounds. Go to the year 2000, and they were sent to slaughter at about 47 days old, weighing about 5 pounds. And today, they are sent to slaughter again at 47 days old, weighing 6 pounds. In 1925, at 47 days old, they weighed just 1 pound. Today, they weigh 6 times as much. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how fast and unnatural this weight gain really is. Another way to look at it is by a study done by the University of Arkansas, who estimated that if children grew at the same rate as chickens raised for meat, they would weigh over 300 pounds by the age of 3. So again, you can only imagine, what this does to, their hearts and their joints, and a lot of them can't even stand up or walk around. about 95% of the chickens, or about 95% of the eggs consumed in this country comes from chickens raised in battery cages like this one here. They will spend their entire lives in here, which means they never get to breathe fresh air, they never get to see sunlight, and they never get to walk in the dirt. Their most basic instincts are suppressed. So they will never build a nest, and they will never perch in a tree. 63 square inches, which is about the size of your standard iPad or tablet computer, that is how much space your average egg-laying hen gets to spend her entire life on. So, imagine putting a tablet computer in your hand, placing a chicken on top of that tablet computer, and that is how much room she has to spend her entire life on. So obviously she can hardly turn around, and she definitely can't, she can't spread her wings. If you ask me, how we treat egg-laying hens in this country is one of the worst forms of abuse that we have out there. And of course, the factory farming system has also made its way to the dairy industry, where dairy cows are kept indoors on concrete floors instead of outdoors in open pastures, as the industry would have us believe, with their happy cow commercials. When we think of milk production, we generally think of somebody, pulling on a cow's udders, but this is something you will never see on today's modern dairy farm. Instead, cows are hooked up to these electronic milking machines several times a day, and they are artificially impregnated in order, to be kept pregnant again and again and again in order to keep the milk flowing. A lot of people forget that the only reason a cow gives milk is if she's had a calf. And the only way that humans get that milk is if the calf's been taken away from her. So we think, of drinking milk as this kind of, very natural thing when it's actually anything but. So what I have up here on the screen now is what the average American knows about where their food comes from, which is basically nothing. And again, this is why Mercy for Animals does the work that we do in order to shine a spotlight on the plight of farmed animals. And one of the ways that we do this is through our undercover investigations. So I'm going to show you just 2 quick videos of some of our undercover footage work. And then we'll contrast them afterwards. So again, just 2 quick videos. We'll make sure the volume's okay here. So that was one of our newer videos that we put out earlier this year. The next one I'm going to show you is some raw footage from some of our investigations. And again, this was standard practices. These are practices that were deemed illegal and that we've been working on getting prosecutions from. Alright, so you guys kind of get the idea. So again, first video, perfectly legal stuff. Second video, illegal stuff. Now, I challenge anyone, if we took those clips and we mixed them up, kind of sliced them together, I challenge anyone to go through and go, oh, okay, well, this is obviously legal to do to an animal. This is definitely illegal to do to an animal. And I think that really shows, just how arbitrary these laws protecting farmed animals really are. And of course, if you did any of those things to a cat or a dog, and you are going to jail on animal cruelty charges immediately. Yeah, it was one of our new videos. Yeah. And you can find that on our website, mercyforanimals.org. So one of the things we get asked about, when we do these presentations are the labels, like, cage-free, free-range, organic. A lot of people think, oh, these must be, better alternatives to the factory farming system. Richard Lobb of the National Chicken Council, so he kind of works for the factory farming industry, said, if you go to a free-range farm and expect to see a bunch of chickens galloping around in pastures, you're kidding yourself. So what a lot of consumers don't realize is that these terms are really industry terms with little and sometimes no real regulation behind them, kind of designed to make consumers feel better about buying a product that's still pretty darn awful. If you take cage-free, for example, egg-laying hens on cage-free facilities are still kept in these huge windowless sheds the length of football fields. The females are still debeaked, and the males are still ground up alive because they still don't have any use for the industry. The only difference is that they are not kept in these tiny battery cages. So while that's marginally better than life on your standard factory farm, the conditions that we find within these places would still shock and horrify most Americans. Sure.
Walmart, and they're like $4 a dozen.
Yeah.
They're certified humane, and I think they have the approval of some kind of certified humane.
Yeah, it's these things that sounds very nice, that it's certified by this and this organization. But if you go back and I can't speak to the specific one you're referring to, but if you go back and do a little bit of research about what these rules and regulations really mean, chances are you'll find that it doesn't mean very much, if anything at all. So this is one of my favorite cartoons to kind of speak to this point as well, and it's called Feel Good Marketing of the Civil War Era, and the one lady saying to the other, well, this petticoat is made from organic cotton picked from free-range slaves. Now, obviously today this is an absurd statement to make, but I really don't think it's going to be too much longer before, if you plugged in, free-range chickens or something like that statement is going to be just as absurd. Something else we get asked about are the laws. We know that there's a lot of laws protecting dogs and cats in this country, so a lot of people assume, well, it must be the same for farmed animals. But unfortunately, that is not the case at all. In fact, there is not one federal law that protects farmed animals during their miserable lives on a factory farm. And a lot of the state laws that protect farmed animals are supposed to actually exempt them due to something called common farming exemptions. So what that means basically is that if the practice is common within the industry, no matter how horrific you or I might think it is, then it is legal to do to an animal. So again, that's why the video of the standard practices are legal things to do, because they are common within the industry. When the farmed animals do leave the factory farm, there are a few laws in place that are supposed to protect them. The first one is referred to as the 28-hour law. And basically what that means is that animals cannot be transported for periods of longer than 28 hours without food, water, and rest. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I get cranky after 2 hours in the car. So imagine 28 hours in a tiny little cage like that. So the 28-hour law obviously leaves quite a lot to be desired. When the animals do make it to the slaughterhouse, there's something called the Humane Slaughter Act that's supposed to protect them, which requires that animals should be rendered insensible to pain before being slaughtered. This seems like the least that we can do for these poor animals after everything they've been through. There's many problems with this one as well, the main one being that the Humane Slaughter Act actually exempts birds. So since about 95% of the meat that's consumed in this country comes from poultry, this law obviously also leaves quite a lot to be desired. There is some progress being made on the legislative front. You guys remember in 2008, the voters of California overwhelmingly came out in support of a law called Proposition 2, which works to get rid of cages on factory farms. And about 8 or 9 other states since that time have kind of passed similar legislation. But where we have the most power, it's in our diets. These industries are driven by consumer demand, which means that you and I are in control. We have the power to stop this cruelty if that's what we want to do. To illustrate that point a little bit more, here's a quote from an anonymous factory farmer who said, "What I hate is when consumers act as if farmers want these things, when it's consumers who tell farmers what to grow. They wanted cheap food, we've grown it." So again, we are in control. These farmers will give us whatever products that we want. This is a picture of a guy named Virgil Butler who worked in a Tyson slaughterhouse plant in Arkansas. He worked there for almost 10 years, and after working there for that long, he ended up, the things he saw really started getting to him. He began having these horrible nightmares, and after talking things over with his wife, he decided he could, in good conscience, no longer work there. So he quit. He became a vegan and started blogging about the things he had seen on this, or in this Tyson slaughterhouse plant, and encouraged other people to become vegan or vegetarian as well. And then for a little while he was traveling the country advocating for more humane treatment of farmed animals. So, in my mind, if a guy like Virgil, a former slaughterhouse employee, can open up his heart and mind and make significant changes in his own life, I think that means that anybody in this country has the ability to do the exact same thing. The Economist writes, "Few people will keep a hen in a shoebox for her entire egg-laying life, but practically everyone will eat smartly packaged, farm-fresh eggs from battery hens." Now, I don't think anyone in here, your friends and family, would keep a hen in a shoebox for her entire life. But when we buy eggs and other animal products, that is essentially what we are asking somebody else to do on our behalf. Think about it. What is the difference between doing these things ourselves and asking somebody else to do our dirty work for us? There is no difference. We are just a little bit farther removed from that cruelty. Studies have shown that the average vegan or vegetarian spares about 2,700 lives during their own lifetime. And this is kind of a visual representation of what that number looks like. So it's a lot of lives. But you certainly don't have to go vegan or vegetarian in order to have an impact. Just by reducing your meat consumption, and you can start to reduce the suffering of these farmed animals. A great place to start is by doing Meatless Monday. It's an easy thing to do, and I don't know too many people that couldn't give up meat just one day a week. And if you commit to doing a meat-free day 1 day a week, you are already reducing the amount of suffering that you cause with your diet by 14%. Something else that people are doing is something called VB6. This stands for Vegan Before 6. And this is something that New York Times writer Mark Bittman came up with. And what that means is that before 6 p.m., you eat 100% plant-based. Then when dinner time rolls around, you kind of eat whatever you want, whether that's, the hamburger or steak, or, you can keep it going by having a veggie burger or a veggie dog. And again, by doing VB6, you are drastically reducing the amount of suffering that your diet would cause. If you're looking to cut out, just one thing, or maybe 2 or 3, think about where you can, reduce suffering the most. This is a slide showing the relative number of farmed animals harmed by average American consumption of different foods. As you can see, the vast majority of that pie is taken up by chickens, followed by eggs and farmed fish. So if today you convince a family or friend to just give up one thing, start with chickens. If you stop eating chickens, you are about 85% of the way there as far as reducing suffering in your diet. You want to go a little further, stop eating eggs. A little further than that, farmed fish. And you're probably about 90% of the way there as far as reducing suffering in your own diet. And if you decide to go all the way vegan or vegetarian, or going cold turkey or cold tofurkey as we call it, remember that it's not about being perfect. It's great that you're taking this step, but if you happen to slip up, give yourself a break. It's okay. Every day is a chance to kind of get going on that path again. Some of the things that we get, or one of the things we get asked about also during these presentations, during the Q&A, are, well, isn't eating vegan or vegetarian terribly expensive? It seems like kind of an elitist thing to do. So one of the things that I like to recommend to people is this great book by Ellen Jaffe Jones called Eat Vegan on $4 a Day. It's a great little book showing how to do exactly that. I eat vegan. I've done it for quite some time on a nonprofit salary. It's a little bit of an adjustment at first, but it's perfectly easy to do with a little bit of research. So if you or someone is looking for some hints, recipes, transition tips, things like that, Mercy for Animals has a great vegetarian starter guide. We have those available at our table. So if you haven't stopped by, please do and grab one. Because of all these things that I just mentioned, and some other things, the per capita meat consumption in this country over the last 6 years or so has dropped by about 10%. So obviously that's a big deal, which means that that there is progress being made in this country. We have a long way to go. There's still a lot of work to be done, obviously, but this is a very encouraging trend to see. Basically, every time we sit down to eat, we make a choice. We can either choose to promote kindness towards animals, or we can support needless suffering and violence. I'm going to kind of wrap things up here with another video. This one talks a little bit more about our investigations and kind of ends this thing on a more uplifting note. So, here we go.
Looking back, I think I've always been acutely aware of the suffering of others.
I was generally the kid that was bullied, and my best friends were always my animals.
My best friend was the family golden retriever. He's the one that taught me how sensitive and intelligent and playful animals can be.
I was able to relate to animals that were abused or that were neglected, and naturally I decided I wanted to spend my life protecting them.
I decided to go undercover after learning about factory farming because I knew someone had to give these animals a voice.
The hardest part of being an investigator is knowing that you can't just grab armfuls of animals and run out of the building.
In the field, though, things are very different, and often the best thing that you can do for an animal is to give them the respite of just leaving them alone.
Every time Mercy for Animals investigators go behind the closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses, they emerge with images that shock most Americans.
There's nothing more powerful than documenting the truth and asking perpetrators of violence to account for what they've done.
Documenting cruelty and violence at factory farms is not glamorous. It's heartbreaking and it's horrific.
You wake up every morning at 4 in the morning, work a physically and psychically punishing job, then you clock out and spend the next few hours logging your footage and writing notes. There were definitely times when I thought I couldn't take it anymore. Then I thought about why I joined MFA in the first place. they get results.
And now something to think about the next time we all open the fridge.
An undercover investigation has revealed the disturbing reality that some cows face.
Our investigator documented hens packed inside of tiny wire cages, workers ripping out the testicles of conscious piglets.
Every day is a living hell for them.
If we did it to a dog, we'd be arrested.
This is the type of abuse that the factory farm industry is fighting so desperately to keep hidden from the American people.
As a civilized society, it is our moral obligation to protect these animals from needless cruelty and suffering.
I chose to work for Mercy for Animals because I felt like I could trust them with my life.
MFA has a lot of guts, and they are willing to take a lot of risks to get the right thing done.
From corporate campaigns to criminal prosecutions to encouraging consumers to adopt a compassionate vegan diet, MFA is just the best at what they do.
McDonald's made a radical change and is now dumping one of the companies most likely to have stopped buying from the farm in question. Costco announces it will cut ties with that farm.
Denny's announced it is suspending immediately its supplier relationship with House of Rainbow.
Target announced that it too is discontinuing the use of all Smartwell egg products.
What has fueled me throughout all of this work is always just seeing how many dedicated activists there are that go out there and that make a difference hands-on, change minds, and save animals.
But we don't stop there. Undercover investigations are the most powerful tool we have to pursue legal justice for farmed animals. Deputies have raided a butterball plant in North Carolina.
Arrest warrants for 7 people on a cattle range.
5 other workers are charged with felonies.
Prosecutors have filed 21 counts of misdemeanor animal cruelty against the owner and 7 employees.
He tortured these animals and he should be held accountable. Maine Contract Farming will pay more than $130,000 to settle 10 counts of cruelty to animals.
As for the Ontario company, they are due in court on July the 21st. The animal agriculture industry is running from us because they know they have something to hide.
It's a sign that we are winning. People are waking up and demanding change. The writing's on the wall.
In the end, we will prevail because truth and justice are on our side, and we won't stop
Until every animal is free to be.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm very proud to, be a part of Mercy for Animals. And I think, the undercover investigators are the true heroes of the movement. They really bring to light, just exactly what the day-to-day horror on a factory farm really is. Let me finish by saying that if this image bothers you, then this image should bother you just as much. As a civilized society, I think it is critical that we examine these issues and that we ask of ourselves and of our society, can we and should we not extend the compassion that we have for dogs and cats to include farmed animals? I think humanity as a whole would be a lot better off. And I hope that each and every one of you will think about this issue more critically and examine the role you'd like to have. And if what you've seen here today, matches up with your morals and values and how you think animals should be treated. Thank you very much.